Hello and welcome to Tea Time. I think the kids are calling this a podcast. This is episode number 1. I'm Adam Tanilian, and I'm just going to talk at my screen, more or less. Let's look at the news. The reading room is open. Starting in Mississippi. What do we got here? Well, there's a bunch of politics going on. Imagine that. Let's have a look at Ashland. What's happening near me? One more time. Oh yeah, these guys are in the news quite a bit recently. Just go on ahead and confirm the stereotype, why don't you? I mean, look at that guy. He had a gun. Somebody gave that guy a gun and some kind of authority. Just look at that guy. Was this in Rankin County as far as I know? So I go to Ole Miss. I got a scholarship for Rankin County. Imagine that, the Goon Squad. I go to Ole Miss and one of the guys was telling the rest of the class about the KKK luncheon. You heard that right, Kappa Kappa Kappa, famous Ole Miss fraternity, has a luncheon in Rankin County where apparently every Sunday or Saturday the local Klan members will actually go and just, they'll wear their little insignias and have themselves a luncheon, and then immediately after that, he said, is the Republican Party of Rankin County, and the joke then is that nobody leaves. The KKK has lunch, and then the Republican Party comes in, has lunch at the same place, and it's the same crowd. Rim shot here. Mississippi teacher allegedly killed by 14-year-old daughter. Well, at least it wasn't at school. Alleging killing her mother. Okay, that's nothing to joke about. There's a lot of murders in the news. I don't know if you've noticed. Doesn't always make national news, but there sure are a lot of murders. There's a lot of mayhem. And then coincidentally, armed robbery. There's also a lot of drug overdoses and drug crime, drug charges. And I'm not one to say that people should go to prison for possessing something that doesn't actually do anything. It just sits there. And I don't think that people should go to prison for having a different thought or slurring their speech or something like that. But they sure do some wild stuff over there in those tent cities. It seems like they could arrest them for something else. What else? Drugs, murder. Yeah, that's pretty much the average day news in the Mississippi papers. A lot of murders and robberies and stuff like that. Let's look over at the international and national news, see what happens here. I'm not a huge fan of the news before I was, but anymore, I don't know. I look at the headlines and I know I can trust the headlines, well, in most cases. And I suppose I got into the habit when I was an intern at WDET-FM in Detroit, where our editor Jerome Bond would have the little interns at the newsroom read through headlines, and we had the wire reports back then. We'd read through headlines and then we'd choose one to write a summary of. So I've been in the habit for a long time of just reading headlines. And some of the headlines are purposefully written to get you to click. Unfortunately, I can't click on these News Plus links. Those are often some of the best stories, but they're behind a paywall. The BuzzFeeder is famous for writing headlines to make people click. I guess that's how they get their money now, all the clicks, which is interesting. Trump trials are a comedy of errors. Yeah, is this The Guardian? I think it said it there. The Guardian, yeah. Apparently The Guardian is an American newspaper now. They've covered American news more than British news as far as I can see recently. Well, I tell you, I don't like looking at that guy's face. I think he's got bad hair. It's just something I can't abide. But there's a lot to that story, isn't there? Megatrend, what else? What else have we got? It's been kind of a lull in the action recently. except for political news. And of course, the political news, just pick your side and then you'll get half or less than half of the story. And isn't that just the reason that I don't really much like the news anymore? There's so much stuff going on in this world that they could write about in detail, but they'll pick whatever gets the most clicks, and then that's like the primary system for political elections. It just kind of results in the most outrageous behavior. You know, make a headline that's just ridiculous so people will click on it, and then more people consume something that's viral, or more people consume something that's offensive almost, or not well thought out, or if it's salacious, they'll consume it more, which is partly the fault of the reader. People just don't read very well, apparently, and they don't have much tolerance for great detail and nuance. Like, they like something to be really clear and one-sided, and then they'll just pile on from there, and that's kind of how we get this wild situation, isn't it? Like, here's one. Is it okay to like Chick-fil-A? It's a chicken restaurant. I don't like fast food at all, but is it okay to like it? Like, that seems to be that people are making a moral question about a chicken restaurant. To be honest with you, had it not been for the news journalists who are just trying to, I don't know what they're trying to do other than make people angry, and people love to be angry, so I guess good on them for recognizing that they can give people what they want. But if it weren't for the news journalists, I wouldn't know the names of these people, and I've seen Chick-fil-A only infrequently, and I don't personally consume fast food, but if I did, I would judge that fast food restaurant on the basis of the chicken sandwich, and call me whatever, blankist, but I tend to think that the business has as its primary objective serving a product or a service. Yeah, it looks like Apple News is almost all News Plus now. Starbucks discriminates against lactose intolerant customers only in the United States. Now, most of the world is lactose intolerant. You want to know a good way to drink coffee if you're lactose intolerant? Black coffee. What's lactose intolerance anyway? It's mostly like farting or something? $5 million. Yeah, that must have been a really stinky fart. Illegal, price discrimination. Okay. So their lactose intolerant milk is more expensive though, charging them more money for non-dairy milk options. But if you go to the grocery store, like a liter of walnut milk is about the same as a gallon of actual milk. I don't know what, it's the United States. They sue for no reason at all, just because they can. Oh, this guy, did he break up with Taylor Swift already? Oh, I guess not yet. That'll be next week or something. I mean, the last thing I want to read about is, reading. Like, I'm going to sit there and read a story about some juiced up footballer who is dating a serial breakup artist or something who looks like something out of a pin-up calendar from the 1940s. She seriously looks like the girls that those bombers used to have painted onto the side of their airplanes in the World War II. Not exactly my cup of tea. I was telling students yesterday that when I was in college, there was a schism among people who listened to music and people who had ideas and opinions about music. And I fell on the side, and this was the less popular side, so I've been suffering for it somewhat. But I fell on the side of what used to be called a critic, but is now just, I don't even know what it is, just like a stigma. I don't think that music like Sexy Red and Cardi B and Taylor Swift and X, Y, and Z, nearly every popular artist that gets the most streams, I don't think they have artistic integrity. I think that they have 2 out of the 3 major components that we saw emerge in the popular music scene in the mid to late 20th century. They've got skill, like they can sing or they can play an instrument. They've got great production value, so it's like proficient, it's technically proficient. It's got great production value. You know, they've got huge. Taylor Swift sold out, I don't know how many venues and made $1 billion or whatever. And I guess good honor for that. But like journalism, I blame the consumer, because the consumers just aren't really thinking through things. And I guess that's kind of like the malaise that's taken over the world with X, Y, and Z recently. But they don't have artistic integrity. So they've got 2 out of 3. They've got technical proficiency. They've got beyond technical proficiency. They got marketability, and so 3 out of 4. Marketability, technical proficiency, production value, but they don't have artistic integrity. And that is just an opinion, but I mean, it's kind of obvious to me just looking at the pictures. They're not as much musicians as they are selling an image, and there's a lot of anger and other stuff implied in that image. It's like hyper-sexualized, and the lyrics to me, that's where I really fall off, is I'm pretty picky about my lyrics. New Trump hush money. Well, I mean, speaking of sexual improprieties and how our country has just come to obsess about sex and material extravagance, and you know, everybody's thingies are festooned. It seems like this guy. Have you seen that Stormy Daniels? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And then, like, you got all these church-going, like, proud, red-in-the-face Christians, you know, talking about Bible, this and that. And here they're just, like, putting DJT up on the pedestal. Come on now. The serial bankrupt, serial philanderer, serially bankrupt. I mean, the man has had, I don't know how many sexual partners. It's disgusting. It's embarrassing. It just shows that there's no real moral center to the country where, all right, so the other side has its moral failings too. Does that mean that this side does not? No, they're both wrong. No, what do we do about that is the bigger question. And that's the hard questions, which people aren't really asking very much. So AP then has all free news. Let's see, Mississippi again, there we are. Pig kidney into a patient. I always thought that was interesting. So here's the real miracle, speaking of Bible and religion and stuff. A miracle. Not only a transplant, but a pig transplant. That people, humans have figured out how to do things like have mobile cellular technology, transplants, all these different medical procedures, new technologies is basically impossible. If you took somebody from history, transported them today, this would be magic or miracle, you know, and probably a bit of both. You know, it shows that this one class of people has gone on, you know, through sharing a patent, through patenting, they share information and then, you know, use bits and pieces of progress from before to make the next great big thing. You know, and this cycle of invention and then refining and discovery has brought us from rocks, you know, like if you look outside your window or if you go out in the forest or whatever, and then go into a city or into one of these laboratories and try to imagine that all of that stuff came from within the earth. I mean, there's some stuff we call artificial, but it's still from within the earth. And it's very hard to associate like rocks and trees and things to the stuff that we're seeing there that we're using and that we're holding in our hands and that we drive in and so on. It's really quite amazing. But now so there's this one class of people who's gone on to develop and obviously understand the natural world very, very well. You know, so well that we can grab little raw ingredients from around the world and refine them and process them and, you know, produce something as complicated as a computer or a car or any of these new technologies, and then use those tools to splice in a pig kidney into a human, and it works. that compared to the constant droning and angry mobs, to the bad grammar that you see online, and just the dullness that befell the people who didn't understand the implicit value of education. This is a stark contrast. It's, so like when we talk about inequality and whatnot, I mean, there it is right there. There's inequality of material wealth, but there's also just inequality of knowledge. There's just some people have just used their brains and their time, and there's natural ability and there's environment to speak of, but you can't discount the fact that they have spent their time learning and growing, and therefore they haven't spent their time wasting their time, And I don't think that everything's fair. Obviously, the world isn't fair, it never has been, but now more than ever, people have a choice of how they spend their time. We got this internet. Now I'm just looking through the news and we can learn a bunch of trivial stuff, but the open internet, we'll get into that in different episodes. The open internet has so much information, whereas if I just scroll through the news even, or social media, I'm not going to get even a fraction of what there is available on the internet. I'm just going to get the fluff and fodder of the day. And I guess that's kind of how we became such an outspoken, kind of dumb culture, like on average. Most people don't have long, detailed understandings of things. It's not like that doctor from a moment ago, or a physicist, or, I mean, even lawyers, they got to go with what the court says in that day, which might change tomorrow. But those who have latched on to learning about the natural world in physics and chemistry and science and mathematics and medicine, they've tapped into unchanging knowledge. They've tapped into actual truth. That's not going to change by the opinions and whims of the public day by day, or month by month, or year by year, or generation by generation. It's just a different kind of knowledge, and then therefore, in my opinion, those people are in a better position in a lot of cases to make commentary and to lead on issues that aren't directly related to their science, where, yeah, there are specialties for sociologists and, politicians and stuff, and there's a certain expertise that helps with a lot of those works, a lot of those jobs. But then on the other hand, those professions that are not in the hard sciences, the physical sciences, or the empirical sciences, they're reflecting social trends, which is essential in some way, because whether people like it or not, impacts how they respond. And, like Galileo spent time in prison, and all these famous scientists through history, were sort of ridiculed and outcast, or so many of them were, because people didn't understand what they were doing. But on the other hand, that's, talk about unfair. Oh my goodness. So there's more of a technical or a rigid sort of philosophy that goes along with the hard sciences that we don't see in humanities and social sciences or pseudosciences. Whereas it would be silly, it would be downright silly if the laws of physics changed because of the popular will of the people. I mean, can you imagine going to a power plant? Oh, no, we changed the law. No, gravity falls up now. That's what we decided. Nope, thermodynamics are going the other way now. No, we made a tweak. Can you imagine how stuff would work if this one area of law functioned as the other area of law? That'd be silly. Apple accused of monopolizing smartphone markets in U.S. antitrust. You don't say. That nice company, but they got rainbows in their office, in their store. Somali pirates. Yeah. Well, so in an article I wrote on international, what did I write it on? The international disorder International disorder. Internet. Come on now. International legal disorder. Let's see what I can do here. International legal disorder. Here we are. On SSRN. I mentioned Somali pirates in here because it occurred to me that, yeah, piracy bad, killing bad, like this is caveman stuff. People all through history, even the most basic of societies, were able to recognize. Oh, why is it not allowing me to do that? Let's try again, international legal disorder. Let's try the other one. Here we are, script D. Trying to make me log in. It is. There's another one. No. So even the most basic of societies had murder and major stuff criminal, right? Like major stuff. Obviously, that's criminal. But in our modern societies, I don't think my browser remembers, does it? It does. But in our modern societies, we like to think of morality as sort of like arguable. So yeah, obviously killing wrong and piracy wrong. However, there's a lot of immoral stuff that goes into how some criminal gangs, criminal groups are doing their business. Like, I'm not conflating, I'm not one to conflate or associate one person's wrongdoing with another person's more or less inaction. However, there's levels. Like, we've got people selling guns to the pirates. Like, they couldn't do the piracy without their guns. They also couldn't do their piracy without without pants. Where is my paper? There we go. So let's look. I got inspired by. Come on. I got inspired by a paper by, I think it was Milton Friedman, called iPencil, and it was about a pencil and all of the parts and processes that go into making a simple thing like a pencil. You got graphite, you got wood, you got paint, you got metal, you got rubber, and they all have to be processed and shipped and all that. And so he mentioned that just in something as simple as a pencil, all these different hands are on this pencil. You might not think about it. No, that's not it. All these different hands are on something as simple as a pencil, and you might not automatically think about it like that because you're just looking at a pencil. You go to the store, you buy a pencil, and of course there's graphite, and of course there's paint, and of course there's rubber, and of course there's metal. But how many people really think about supply chains? And obviously it's been in the news. Most people know what a supply chain is now, that COVID disrupted supply chains and whatnot. But how many people really think about, well, like a smartphone, it's got this element from this place, and then they take that element from, say, China for rare earths, and then they got to refine it and then send it over to a factory in some other place, and it'll combine with some elements and some parts from another place, and then you got, so the hands that are the people who are extracting the elements first, and they got to ship it. So you got trucks taking it to the first factory for processing, and you got the people who are processing it. And then if you want to go out another level, the people who made the machines that are processing it, and by the time you get to the actual phone, you got parts from many different companies in many different countries. And then, again, at those factories where they made the parts, there are the machines that make the machines, and the people who mined the minerals that go into the machines that make the machines, and the people who made, the people who came up with the theories and the hard science, the patents that, or the empirical physical discoveries or whatever that led to making the machines. You got the people at the patent office who are, writing the patents. You got all these different tertiary and peripheral characters involved. It's like the whole made in the world thing from the world, what is it called? From the World Trade Organization is a real thing, right? So, but in the media, we just get like these real dumbed down, simplistic views of things. Like, yes, Somali piracy is bad, right? But there's a lot of bad stuff that happens in the world. I mean, I suppose maybe the main reason we hear about Somali piracy is because it disrupts shipping, and then obviously food security and even just consumer goods security affects global security, in that if people don't have enough food, they get angry, and then they kill each other more, or they riot more, and they are then, if without food and without access to supply chains for long enough, they might be more likely to commit acts of war, and so on and so forth. But it is pretty complicated. Let's see where I said something about, yeah, here we are. Experts never comment on the minutiae, such as the gasoline used to propel the pirate boats. They all need gas, or the manufacturer. Are they going to be pirates naked? I mean, I guess maybe, but I'm guessing still that they need shoes and pants. It's my guess. But certainly the guns and ammunition, that's the main one. Small arms, not nuclear weapons, small arms claim the largest number of lives. You got 15, 20,000 now, 20, 22,000 murders in the United States alone. Those are mostly handguns. You got the odd mass shooter with an AR or something like that, but it's mostly handguns. Around the world, the AK has claimed more lives than all other weapons combined. Regular old artillery and light arms. Whereas nuclear weapons have been used twice, and that's a terrible thing. That nuclear weapon's a terrible waste of money. But there's so much opaqueness in the international arms trade, and I get into that in this article here, that it's like, what do you expect? You make all these guns, and then just kind of like let them go wherever they want. Like have very few regulations on guns, and then what? Be surprised when people take up arms and end up doing terrible things? Well, I guess to me that doesn't seem very sensical, but I have a different way of thinking about stuff, I suppose. They could use blockchain technology to, for example, ensure that this shipment from this factory gets only to these authorized dealers, and then if those guns go missing, well, they could be tracked to the last known point of sale or something like that. But I guess we're just not all that into it. Like the technology is here. I said many, many years ago, the technology is all here, which would allow us to overcome pretty much all of our main problems. In the short term anyway. Now, if we all had enough to eat, then there's evidence, if everybody think we're all copacetic, there's evidence to suggest then there'd just be more people, and then there'd be laziness, and then that would just create a bigger need, and so on. But that's mostly theory too. But we got the technology to do stuff, we just don't have the political will. And the economic paradigm hasn't shifted such that individual countries can undertake to do something radically different with money supply, with money valuation. MMT is something that takes a whole global effort. Like you had gold standard of Bretton Woods, and now this fiat system, and there's little hope that we're going to shift toward anything different for quite some time. but I guess the possibility is always there. It's not like money fell from the sky. It's not like the balance of payment system and the interest rate function on the same rules as the weather or the cosmos. It's just all human made. But sure enough, within certain boundaries, people do tend to do this when that happens. But shipping tycoon drunk when she drowned in Tesla. Okay. Deadly suicide bomb. Going to bed with an empty stomach, that is no fun. That's no fun. A lot of people don't know what it's like to be hungry. I think that's why the annual obligatory diet of Ramadan is an important thing. Now, when I was in Saudi, a lot of the people actually gained weight during Ramadan because they just go nocturnal, which I think is not a recognizable fast by historical standards, but that's just my opinion. Being hungry is something that a lot of people just don't know at all. Don't know at all. What else? What else is in the news? It's kind of a lull in the action right now. But that might be purposeful because there's actually more than ever. There is some serious stuff going on, but journalists are not trained in fields enough to give thorough analysis. What journalists are trained to do is get clicks. And so then they're going to gravitate toward superficial stuff, like our entertainment, sex and drugs and mayhem, because that's visceral, and everybody can kind of understand what that is. Whereas the real trouble, the real problems are cerebral, and they take time, to sit and read through a book is not going to be something that most people are willing to do very often. And so the journalists have to take snippets of the story, but then who puts it all together? Maybe nobody. This really does seem rather random. Here's the Gaza. Look at this. So I came home one day in Saudi, and my wife was watching the TV, and she was just in tears, not like sobbing, but she was watching in Syria. So that was the previous disaster, and just looking at the rubble and the bodies and all that, and she was just really disturbed by the fact that there's so much death and destruction, and it's just like it happens, and hardly anybody stops to think about, we all know it's immoral and wrong, but then it didn't just come out of nowhere. And that's kind of what the news media situation is. It fails to recognize fundamental causes, and I guess that's our state of affairs with the governments too, that this came from something else, and unfortunately that's been taboo. But this is just the next thing, the latest thing in a string of bad things. And, when we're just working one day to the next and only people are split up into their individual family huts and things, and they're just set out to make enough money to pay for the food bill and rent, then I guess there are disincentives to really tackle the big issues, and there are incentives to just stay the status quo. And occasionally, now more than ever, we're getting voices of, serious analysis, but it's not really in the big houses. Probably because the average consumer of media doesn't want to be bothered with the real core issues, like in the United States, I think that's our relative wealth in a lot of places, like there's been this sense that war is an essential element of the economy, that war is inevitable, and so we might as well just be what we call the good guys, and then there's like, if we don't do it and somebody else will, as far as making weapons of mass destruction and things, there's all kinds of underlying fundamental assumptions that affect clear rational analysis that could, at scale, lead to significant change, and I guess part of that is what's, the status quo is being, thinking in the manner which others have thought for quite some time, and then thinking in a manner which is popular in the instant moment. Let's go to Bangkok here, or Grung Tape. Not too many people know it's a Grung Tape. It's calling it Bangkok. Thanks, they're Vietnam veterans. Handling a police feud, breaking the cycle. Casinos, yeah. Well, you shouldn't gamble, but they do make money. What else? A Russian, come on. So there have been several cases in Thailand. Oh my God. A Russian tourist who kicked a pregnant shop over in Kampong. He's been sentenced to fine 500 baht and sentenced to 15 days. That's terrible. There's been a string of, first it was Swiss, and then there were 2 Swiss men, and then there was a couple of New Zealanders, and now a Russian tourist, white male foreign tourist, who are doing bad things. And then it's just absurd, like these 2 New Zealanders got pulled over by the police, and the police definitely pull over tourists intentionally to make money, and it's not fair. But these guys tackled the policeman and took his gun. The gun was discharged on the scene. Luckily nobody was hurt. It's just really bad behavior. I don't see that one in here. And it suggests, I'm not all on board with the left reactionary crusaders message. I do not, pray at the altar of Andrea Ocasio-Cortez or whatever, but at the same time I got to recognize that it is a double standard, that's for sure. Not as much domestically as internationally. Like, the reason I don't drink the punch that they're drinking over there in progressive land anymore is because they've just conveniently ignored what the day-to-day grind of international stuff. Like our embassies, the Western embassies are sending spies out into, the CIA out into different territories, and certainly the New Zealand embassy was there, mildly pressuring or persuading the Thai government to release those tourists. Whereas if a couple of Thais tackled a police officer in New Zealand and tried to grab his gun, that would be years in prison. Like, if a Thai kicked a pregnant Russian woman, I don't know what Russia's like. Russia might be a failed state in a way. But I would assume that if the same happened in that home country, like the Swiss guy who kicked a Thai doctor off a step or something like that, or the other Swiss guy who beat an old woman in a supermarket, if this happened the other way around, that would be years of prison. Likewise, if the Chinese military rolled up on American shores or wanted to put a base in Mexico, I think we know what would happen. Doesn't matter what their reason is, but somehow the people who fight occupation in their foreign homelands are terrorists or something or other, and the people are under the impression that the Western militaries are, I don't want to say police of the world, because police suggest there's a law, and there's not. And the evidence of there not being a law is that this double standard, that I don't know how many casualties have there been committed by the U.S. military since World War II. More than the Holocaust, friends. And somehow that just goes unnoticed, and we thank them for their service and whatnot. And I mean, it is what it is, but it doesn't exactly, it's not going to get everybody, So I like to say, don't be surprised when some people don't agree, It's like the story that we tell on Sundays about, this guy was strung up and died, and then 3 days later, he came back to life. And then he kind of floated into the sky and was assumed, where he now sits beside the most powerful all creator, blah, 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 and controls the price of potatoes, the weather, and who laughs and cries. If we told that story again today, people wouldn't believe it. They would say, no, I think those three, there's at least one other possibility, is that those three women at the tomb just lied, just made it up. And that it means something else. It means something else. It means they think the idea lives on or something. I don't know. But don't be surprised when not everybody buys it, man. Don't get angry when some people have a question. Well, this doesn't seem like what you're saying, you know? Like this guy here, he's going to be in the news for the next, forever. Forever. And he's the champion of the little guy, right? Of course they're warming up to him. His only major legislation was tax cut. Of course they're warming up to him. Oh, but then if I don't like him, that means that I like such and such, or I'm blah, 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 blah. That's a false dichotomy. Another fallacy. But is that the champion of the little guy right there? Kind of doubt it. I mean, it's good to have different types of thinking. It's good to have different ideas. It's good that not everybody has to think so carefully about their words, because newsflash, not everybody thinks so carefully about their words, and newsflash again, not everybody takes other people's feelings into consideration. I mean, it's not like Antifa and the minions in riots and, campus shout downs, like a group of students who shout down a speaker are not taking the feelings of that speaker into consideration. And of course, then the new thing is to say, well, I am not tolerant against intolerance. I don't tolerate intolerance, but then circle back around, well, you're not being tolerant, so somebody else is going to tolerate you. And basically, it's not a solution. I get the idea that this guy's wrong, but who's right? And so lesser of two evils is still evil. But the champion of the little guy, I mean, that's a wacky one right there. Kind of doubt it. But neither is the other people. There's the problem. So I think the real uncomfortable state of affairs that we're in here is just that we've kind of reached our limit. Oh, this thing has gone off now. Well, that's the news, isn't it? Not a whole lot going on today. Let's check the business news, see if there's anything more here. I saw that the economy is soaring because the Dow Jones Industrial Index is 40,000. Yeah, if you have money to invest, but you know how many people are investing in the stock market? Like 10%. When I drive down the street, I don't see any factories. I see a lot of high dollar, high ticket items that come from somewhere else very far away. And I don't see much but minimum wage jobs and service jobs like flipping burgers, saying hello to customers. I don't see anything that's going to result in increasing pay over time. I don't see much going on domestically. I drive into these small towns and the downtowns are just destroyed. There's vacant buildings everywhere. The price of everything is going up, and there's very little opportunity to turn it back on its heels because of the price of it, building plants now. Like if we were going to try to have factories again in the United States, newsflash again, you can't have all this stuff and no pollution. It just doesn't work. People, you got to make choices. You like stuff? Well, then maybe a factory isn't for you. Maybe you actually like factories, but you don't want to smell the smoke, so you offshore it. But then isn't that racist or whatever people trope at? So the Dow Jones is all high in that, and I wish I had money to invest, because the past couple of years have been an incredible investment climate. I mean, you could just stick into a CD for like 6%, which is pretty good, actually. But you got to have money to invest, and who can make more than what they're paying out? I don't know, 10%, 20%? And it's not like education is the only cure-all either. Like, you got to do just the right thing in just the right amount of time at the tail end of high school and into early 20s if you want to have one of these $1 million retirements. And that's why people are so angry. That's why they turn to somebody who's just shaking things up, saying stupid junk, like the Orange Menace. But I don't think that that's the solution. You know, the solution is to get smart and have, like, instead of just elevating a handful of people, the solution is to elevate the base, which can only happen through, nowadays it's going to be STEM learning. It's not going to be learning the Bible and learning humanities and liberal arts. It's going to be something that actually can pay the bills, and understanding the physical universe has intrinsic value, you know? It's not going to be becoming a lawyer. And I think that's a big part of what's going on now, is we're seeing a failure in our legal system, which is going alongside the failure in our economic system. Malicious negligence, eh? That's not surprising. Well, in the next episode, I'll look at education news, I think, because this episode is getting kind of long already. But, so the news, it's out there, lots of stuff going on. But what does it all mean? Like, so you got all these nice little partitioned articles, and they got their nice little lines between them. They're all in their own little box. And they're together on one screen, or, you know, on one device here. But who puts it all together? You know, who puts these things together? I've been putting these things together for a long time. Like, if you look at, if anybody would ever read these long academic journal articles that people write, 322 references on that one. You know, people in academia spend half their time writing these journal articles and research that only other researchers read. But a lot of the solutions are in these things, and unfortunately, because they're not being taken up by other people, then what ends up happening is people in academia are even messing with their data, manipulating data, you know, selecting and excluding data to come to certain conclusions because, you know, they want to get that big research grant. Look at all of this junk, time and time and time, dozens and dozens of hours putting together something that, I don't know, it's rewarding, I guess, is just for me anymore, because I don't know, who knows who reads these things, other than maybe the odd academic researcher. That said, it has given me a mighty powerful worldview that, unfortunately, makes me not really part of the status quo, because the average person just kind of doesn't seem to do much, if you ask me. Like, they'll use the internet, but they don't even really know how to do targeted searches, right? Or just like scrolling through something, just being passive consumers, taking what the machine gives them, rather than, you know, picking a topic. Sure, you got to have a topic. You could pick any news item and then just do a Google search for that, and you're going to come up with thousands and thousands and thousands of hits. You know, and then combine that with, you can go to YouTube and learn anything you want, but people just want to look at, rump shakers and goofy stuff, just like outrageous stuff. That's the main thing. It's just outrageous. It's like when Eminem came on the scene. He was the shock artist, I guess, or the shock jock Howard Stern. You know, that's what gets ratings apparently. And so uncoincidentally, we're just kind of like in neutral, or just like in a rut, or going nowhere, and not looking great for the future. I know that in other places in the world, in other places in the world, there's at least more of implicit valuing of education generally, especially mathematics and STEM education. But in the United States, I don't know, we can hardly speak with proper grammar. And people are really adverse to speaking with simple proper grammar. Use a be verb, conjugate the be verb, I do, you do, he, she does. You know, these things, second language speakers are speaking English better than native speakers nowadays, and that's really disturbing. So all that, I mean, all the negativity you see in the news, I guess it's not wrong, it's not invalid, but what do you do with that? Like, complaining isn't the solution. Maybe talking about it is part of the solution, but then actually having solutions. And so I've come up with a couple. But people don't want solutions, it seems. Isn't that right? You know, people really like being angry. So, you know, don't be surprised when not everybody jumps on board with that. All right, I'm going to get out of here. This has been tea time. The reading room is now closing. Bye.